Welcome to the Friday edition of the Morning Pitt, final day before Pitt's first road trip of the season. The Panthers going to Kalamazoo tomorrow to take on Western Michigan on the road, their first road game of the season, and a game that certainly carries some element of revenge to it as Pitt looks to get one back after losing to Western Michigan last year. A real shot at their first non-conference, undefeated non-conference season pretty much ever, other than 2020 when the only non-conference team they played was Austin Peay. They've never had an undefeated non-conference season, and it looked like last year would be the year. After they went on the road and beat Tennessee, it seemed like they were in line to finally pull it off until they came home and stumbled against Western Michigan. And they stumbled for a lot of reasons, and that game had an impact on the season. A lot of impact on the season for a lot of different reasons, not the least of which was the players-only meeting that was called after the game or in the wake of the game, and maybe acted as a springboard to get the team focused and back on track, which they obviously were, as they went on to have a very successful rest of the season, as we know. And so while this team, I think this year has a lot of motivation for why it wants to go to Western Michigan and win. It has a lot of reasons to want to try and win this game. It has a lot of motivation that stems almost entirely from, the implications for 2022 and the difference between 2-1 and 1-2. Losing to a MAC team on the road will most certainly drop you out of the top 25, as opposed to winning that game might not bump you up too far, but it'll at least keep you in the running and keep your goals in front of you, and help you avoid what would ultimately be an unnecessary loss. But there's still a little bit of that revenge factor, I think, that's lingering in there. There's still a little bit of that revenge factor, particularly for the players on defense who feel like they were embarrassed by that game. And that's not a disrespect to Western Michigan, but just more of the success that Western Michigan was able to have. Pitt expects to do better than that. They expect to be better than that against any opponent. To have any opponent just sort of go up and down the field on them, particularly in crunch time, I think was embarrassing for that Pitt defense. And so I think they do feel like they owe Western Michigan one. I think they feel like they do have a little bit of revenge on their mind. But their focus largely is on what they need to do this season. Western Michigan this season is 1-1, just like Pitt is. They lost the season opener to Michigan State, and then they won last week against Ball State. And we'll get into those games and what Western Michigan did, or what Michigan State and Ball State attacked Western Michigan, the success they might have found, what Pitt might be able to do. But I think we all know. We know because we've been talking about it all week, and we know because it's the main thing on your mind. We know that this game, and the most pressing issue for this game, is not anything to do with Western Michigan. It's Pitt's quarterback situation. Yesterday, Pat Narduzzi said the quarterback situation is going to be a game-time decision. He was asked if Kedon Slovis is going to be part of that decision. He said yes, so at least you can rest assured that Kedon Slovis is expected to make the trip. That would certainly put a real damper on things if he doesn't even get on the plane. But it still leaves the door open for the possibility that Slovis might not play. I'll say what I've been saying most of the week since we started getting some solid reports one way or the other. I think there's a really good chance that Kedon Slovis will play. I think there's a really good chance that I shouldn't say a really good chance. I think there's a good chance that he'll be available to play in this game. At what percentage out of 100 he'll be, I don't know. And I also don't think it's guaranteed just yet that he will be available. I do believe Pat Narduzzi that it's going to be a game time decision. If not game time, then game morning or game afternoon. This being a primetime game, they have more time to work out that situation and figure out what they want to do with Kedon Slovis, or figure out what Kedon Slovis is up for. Figure out what Kedon Slovis can do. But I do believe that decision will be made Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon when they see where Kedon Slovis is. I mean, he's going to be in Kalamazoo. There's no question of where Kedon Slovis is. But you understand what I'm saying. If Kedon Slovis is ready to play. And that's going to be the determination. And if he's ready to play, he'll play. And if he's not, it's going to be Derek Kyler or Nate Yarnell. My man Nick Patty on the screen right there. I'm not expecting to see him in this one. I'm not really sure if he's going to go to Kalamazoo himself. Maybe he will. I think they expanded travel rosters or something like that. I don't expect to see Nick Patty available to play. I believe it's going to be Slovis, Kyler, or Yarnell. And if it's not Slovis, you get into sort of the quarterback competition that probably happened this week of Derek Kyler and Nate Yarnell getting more work than they've gotten since training camp ended, more work running Pitt's actual offense to see who gives the team the best option. And in those two guys, you've got Derek Kyler, a transfer from Dartmouth, very efficient at Dartmouth, did a great job not turning the ball over, which is one of the key things you want when you're in a situation like this. If you have a guy that has to come in and replace the starting quarterback, the number one thing you want him to do is not turn the ball over. You want him to be prepared enough and calm enough and have his head about him enough that he's not going to make that kind of mistake and turn the ball over because that will sink your chances. That's the baseline, is you don't make a mistake. It's kind of like punt returns. You know what I mean? Like the number one thing the punt returner has to do before anything else, and more important than anything else, is catch the ball. Catch the ball. Before you even get into conversations of setting up the blocking scheme and do you have a guy who can break one and, how are you going to return? Are you going to go left or right? Can you make that first man miss? All those other things, they're all secondary to whether or not you catch the ball. Because if you don't catch the ball, you can blow the whole thing. And Tennessee will tell you that because they saw it firsthand when they did it. You have to protect the football. If you are a backup quarterback who's called into duty, if you called into action, the number one thing you have to do is protect the ball. The play that lost the Peach Bowl last year was an interception. You have to take care of the football. That's number one. And Derek Kyler has a background in that. I mean, I think that's what he did at Dartmouth. Now, playing in the Ivy League versus playing in the ACC is a big difference. And it's probably a lot harder to protect the football in the ACC than it is in the Ivy League. But at least he's got a little experience doing so. Nate Yarnell has no experience doing any of that. This is his second year on campus. I don't think he played college football. I don't think he played high school football in 2020. He was a freshman at Pitt last year in 2021. I don't think he played. I think he missed the 2020 season. He got hurt or something like that. I forget exactly the details. So it's been a couple years since Nate Yarnell has played in a competitive football game. But he's big and he's got a big arm. He can move a little bit. The coaching staff liked him a lot. You know what I mean? They liked what they saw out of him a lot when he first got to Pitt and as he worked through last season before he got hurt and really kind of had to be on the sidelines. And he was on the sidelines for, I think, the bulk of the season last year. Wasn't able to practice in spring camp, and really just started ramping up in training camp in August. Probably earlier, probably over the summer he was able to start throwing with the receivers, but really started ramping up in August. And so you have two guys who, I mean, Yarnell was at least around the offense and around Frank Cignetti in the spring and around the guys, as opposed to Derek Kyler, who arrived over the summer. But neither of these two guys, Kyler or Yarnell, has really done much actual playing in the offense prior to last month. And then once the season started, they both saw all of their work kind of cut. I think Yarnell took a lot of the work with the scout team. Kyler just, for the occasional number 3 quarterback reps. And I think he was the guy who was prepared to go in if Nick Patty had to come out in the Tennessee game. This week, though, they got a lot of work. They got more work in the offense than they've gotten since the end of August. And maybe more work than they got during some of the weeks in training camp, trying to find out who gives them the best option. I don't know what the answer is. Like I say, the best thing I can say about Derek Kyler is he didn't really turn the ball over at Dartmouth. The best thing I can say about Nate Yarnell is I don't know. I know that the coaches were excited about what they saw out of him prior to getting hurt last season, for whatever that's worth, as a true freshman who was not on the field and wasn't going to get on the field. That's the best thing I've got. And so I don't know who the best option there is if Kedon Slovis can't play. Like I said, Derek Kyler has the experience. Nate Yarnell might have done better in practice this week. We don't really know. We'll find out. We'll find out on Saturday. Not just, in the event of Slovis not being able to play, but we'll see who gets called upon if Slovis has to come out. We'll see who's kind of acting as that number 2 quarterback, whether it's Kyler or Yarnell. The best case scenario for Pitt, of course, is that Kedon Slovis plays. And now I'll caution that by saying, or couch that by saying that even if he plays, I expect him to be maybe somewhat limited. And what that looks like, I'm not entirely sure. It probably would be the kind of thing we can't really see. We don't really know how much of the playbook may or may not be available at any given time. And I mean, make no mistake. I mean, if you're working with Nate Yarnell or you're working with Derek Kyler, you're going to have a limited playbook as well. Because there's only so much those guys are going to be able to process after having not really been operating the offense for the past few weeks or really into the last month. But Slovis still gives them the best chance to win. And I think he's shown that, and I talked about it on Wednesday night during the Panther-Lair show. I've talked about it at different points throughout the week this week that, he 500 yards in 6 quarters was pretty good. He's one of the most productive passers in the ACC right now, and he's only played a game and a half. I think he has steadily. Somebody else said this, and I would even come back to the quote that Pat Narduzzi had after the West Virginia game on the Monday following the West Virginia game when he said, watching the tape, Keaton played a lot better than I thought he did. And I think a lot of fans and media, as we've you watch the game, you say, oh, he missed this throw, or oh, he held on to the ball too long. And then you go back and you look at it a little bit more and you check out the numbers and you reevaluate and you're like, actually, he was pretty good. His throws were pretty sharp. He's got a nice arm, puts the ball in the right spot, seems to make some good reads. Not every read is perfect, but he seems to make some pretty good reads overall. He's playing pretty well. And I think he has sort of steadily improved from the first half of the West Virginia game to the second half of the West Virginia game to the first half of the Tennessee game. I think he got better each step of the way to where he was playing pretty well against Tennessee. He was getting knocked around a lot, but he still threw for 195 yards. You can figure out the pace on that. That's a good game. That's a good performance by a quarterback. And so you need that guy to show up and be back on the field leading your offense as soon as possible. I just don't know how soon that can be. In the meantime, it's got to be the Izzy show. In the meantime, it's got to be Israel Abanikanda leading the charge for this offense. I mean, they're going to have to lean on him. I shouldn't say much in the way they leaned on him against Tennessee because, Slovis was still throwing really well. But I think they're going to have to go into this game with the approach of establishing the running game, getting Izzy Abanikanda going, and riding that as long as you can to try and set up play action and make a few plays in the passing game off of the run. But control the ball, sit on the ball as long as you can, keep Western Michigan's offense on the sidelines, not because you're scared of them, but just because that gives you the best chance. If you have a bunch of 8-9 minute drives, ideally ending in touchdowns, you're going to set a pretty strong tone for the game that your defense only needs to get a couple stops and they won't be able to really catch up to you because you're just sitting on the ball. Not to mention that Izzy Abanikanda is one of the best playmakers on this team and one of the top guys. And you look back at these 2 games so far for Western Michigan. Jeez, where did that come from? I clicked over to the Western Michigan box score on ESPN. ESPN has all these autoplay videos. Did you hear that? Magic Carpet Ride start playing there. Michigan State ran for 197 yards against Western Michigan. Jalen Berger had 120 yards. Jarek Broussard had 54 yards on 10 carries. And then Ball State had another big game. I just had the stats here, and I closed the window because I was because of Magic Carpet Ride. Where is it here? I apologize. There it is. Carson Steele, 26 carries for 147 yards for Ball State, an average of 5.7 yards per carry and a touchdown. And what's interesting is I was looking at some of the numbers on Pro Football Focus. Like Jalen Berger has a big game for Michigan State against Western Michigan, and he did most of it kind of up the middle. Most of his yards, 60-70% of his yards, came running up the middle off, between the center and the right guard, between the center and the left guard. Carson Steele for Ball State had something like 80 out of his 135 yards were to the outside. So approaching it in different ways, and Western Michigan kind of gave up a bunch of rushing yards. I mean, what's the math on that? 197 plus 156. You're looking at 350 some yards in 2 games that Western Michigan has allowed on the ground. So there should be an opportunity there for Pitt's running game with Izzy Abanikanda to go out and really kind of take control. And if you need to work Vincent Davison, if you need to work Sibo Flemister in, I mean, go for it. but you know who your number one guy is. And I probably, as I've talked about this a lot this week, about the number one options, and you got to get the ball to Izzy Benicanda, and you got to get it to Jared Wayne, you got to get it to Gavin Bartholomew. And I stand by that. I believe that. Those are the three guys who give you the best chance to win. But that doesn't mean that you entirely ignore the other players as well. You certainly don't ignore the other receivers. I think there are playmakers in that group. And you don't necessarily ignore the other running backs. You're not going to hand off to Izzy Benicanda for every snap of the game. I do think he should get more than 20 carries, but I also think there are opportunities there for Vincent Davis and or Sebo Flemister. I'm interested to see what Sebo Flemister can do. And I'm interested to see how Vincent Davis can work in this particular offense, which he hasn't really gotten an opportunity to do much yet. I think, 5 carries through the first 2 games. So you're going to have to lean on the running game. I think you're going to use a few of those backs. Maybe Daniel Carter gets a carry or 2. Abanikanda is the guy, but the other players are going to be in the mix as well. It's going to be really about blocking it up and opening holes for Abanikanda, which Michigan State was able to do and which Ball State was able to do. And if Michigan State and Ball State can do it, then Pitt should be able to do it as well. And if that takes some rotation on the offensive line, if it takes substitutions and putting different guys into the lineup, then that's what you have to do. And I do think there's probably a pretty good chance we'll see a new look offensive line, not necessarily because of any shakeups due to depth chart justice or anything like that, but more so because Owen Drexel left that Tennessee game late in the fourth quarter, didn't look good, and I'm really not sure if he's going to be available for this game. So you're probably looking at a guy like Jake Cradle shifting over from right guard to center, or you're looking at Terrence Moore coming in as a redshirt freshman. He's the guy who replaced Drexel when Drexel got hurt at the end of the Tennessee game. It'd be interesting to see the impact of those moves too, and that probably also plays into the quarterback discussion because we're talking about new quarterback center exchanges. If it is Kedon Slovis and he's shown that he's more comfortable working out of the shotgun, are you going to go shotgun 95% of the time when you're working with a brand new center? Now you're getting a little bit dicey. You're kind of rolling the dice a little bit. You're getting a little more risky. Even if it's more comfortable for Kedon Slovis, you're taking a chance by having that many shotgun snaps. Do you change your offense, though? Do you drastically go away from what works and what the guy is comfortable with just because you're worried that the center's going to snap it over his head? Coaches are going to have to figure this thing out, or figure that one out. Not too many other injuries, I think, on offense really of note. It seems like it should be all or most hands on deck. And that actually, I was going to get to this at some point anyway. And I think it's important to keep in mind. I think a lot of people have kept it in mind. I've seen other people sort of reference it. Pitt really did have a gauntlet start to the 2022 season. Say what you will about West Virginia, and they might only win 3 or 4 games or something like that. Their head coach might get fired. He's being saved by a buyout, which we've heard that story before. Say what you want about that West Virginia team. First of all, I don't think they're as bad as they've played. I don't think they're as bad as their record would indicate. And second of all, even if they had some holes, even if they had some issues, some coaching problems, that was a Super Bowl for both teams, particularly for West Virginia. All right, that was a game where you were going to get their absolute best, and I think you got something close to it. And to emerge with a victory, even if it's against a team that ends up not being very good or not having a very good record, I think is still a commendable win. Because of all the intensity in the game and all the extra sort of energy in the game, which is not necessarily, that's not going to be the case if you open against UMass. It's not going to be the case if you open against Villanova or Albany. It might not even be the case if you open against, say you have a series with Wisconsin. Say the Wisconsin series that's coming up in a couple years. Say you open a year with Wisconsin. It's not going to have that same kind of juice. Even if Wisconsin's not very good or Pitt's not very good, it's not going to generate the energy that game to open the season generated. And then to follow it up with an SEC opponent, with Tennessee, who's a good team, who physically was giving Pitt all they could handle and giving them the business, obviously. You see all the guys that got hurt. That's a heck of a way to start a season. And I know we all want to see them play competitive games and play exciting games and play against interesting opponents. And this looked on paper like a great schedule. It's really fun. This team is beat up right now. They've run the gauntlet with these 2 opening games, and to follow it up with a road trip against a team that beat them last year. Never mind the personnel changes. This team, bulk of the guys on this roster know they were on the team last year that beat Pitt. Bulk of the guys on this Western Michigan team know they already beat Pitt, and now they're welcoming Pitt to their house for a primetime game. This Western Michigan's not Tennessee, probably not West Virginia, but it's a real challenge. And they've got talented players. Their little running back, Sean Tyler, their big running back, Ladarius Jefferson. I mean, those are two good backs. Jack Salopic from Norwin. I'm not sure about him. We'll see what he does. But Corey Crooms is a legit wide receiver, a really good receiver, had big numbers against Pitt last season. This is a dangerous game, and I talked about this on the Wednesday night live show. I mean, this is a dangerous game that Pitt is walking into after playing two really tough games. They were tough for different reasons, but they were both really tough. And so this is a challenging situation. It's going to take, Pitt's going to need, a few guys are going to have to rise to the occasion here. And I think Izzy Abanikanda is going to be one of them. And then I think on defense, you're going to need some guys to step up and make some big plays. Whether it's Eric Hallett and Brandon Hill coming up with some interceptions in the secondary. I think the linebackers are going to be challenged. With the RPOs, Pat Narduzzi said Western Michigan has been kind of running about 40% RPOs this season, which is still a lot, but not as much as they were, running like 70% going into the Pitt game last year. I wouldn't be surprised if that number goes over 40% in this game tomorrow, just because of the success that Western Michigan had against Pitt's defense last season. I think Western Michigan is going to force Pitt to show that they can stop the RPOs before Western Michigan themselves stop it. And sometimes coaches fall into that problem, fall into that sort of fallacy or that faulty way of thinking of, well, they know we're going to do it, so we got to do something different. Okay, have something else planned, but at least make them stop it first. And I'm pretty sure Western Michigan's going to make Pitt stop the RPOs before the Broncos themselves stop doing them. And so, the safeties, obviously, I think those were guys that we circled last season and said, well, they didn't play very well. But the outside linebackers have as much to do with that as anything. And we've said this a lot of times, whether it was Mason Rudolph in 2017 or, Caleb Ellaby in 2021, these teams that run these RPOs and have success against Pitt, they are picking on the outside linebackers and manipulating the outside linebackers and their propensity to chase the run. So that ball goes in the running back's belly. The outside linebackers commit to defending the run. Ball gets pulled, and there's a slot receiver running free with a full head of steam at the safety. And that's a tough situation for a safety to be in. It's a tough situation for a safety to play against. And it happened a whole lot last year, and we thought the safeties looked bad. But, well, the outside linebackers didn't do what they're supposed to do, which is redirect the receiver, make contact with the receiver, and slow the receiver down, throw off the timing of the play. Now, Pat Narduzzi claims they've got more answers than they had. He says they've got more answers than they've ever had to stopping these RPOs. We'll find out. Because, like I say, if I'm Western Michigan, I want Pitt to show that they can stop it before I stop it. Overall, if I'm Pitt's defense, hopefully I know what I need to do to stop the RPOs. Hopefully I know what I need to do to defend those plays. But I'm also thinking we have to win this game. We might have less than 100% starting quarterback, or we might have our number 3 or number 4 quarterback starting in this game. We can't rely on the offense. The offense is probably going to be a lot of ball control, or should be a lot of ball control and slow down the clock type of thing. We have to go out there and make big plays. If Western Michigan's offense comes out there and they're all hyped up and antsy because they've been on the sideline for 6 or 7 or 8 minutes, we have to be ready for them to try to attack us, and we have to make them pay. We have to get after them. Jack Salopic, looking at his stats this season, after these 2 games with Western Michigan and Michigan State and Ball State, he's only been under pressure about 37% of his dropbacks. He's only been blitzed about 25.8%, according to Pro Football Focus. He's been blitzed 25.8% of his dropbacks. And when he gets blitzed, he's only completed 54.5%. So he's under 60%, under 55% completions when he's blitzed. When he's under pressure, 10 of 24 for 41.7% completions. And 1 interception, no touchdowns. You have to pressure him. I think you have to be aggressive. You have to get after him. You have to remember some of the things you learned from taking on Sam Hartman in the Wake Forest RPO offense last season, even if it's different from what Western Michigan does. And you have to get after him. You have to get in his face. I mean, Haba Baldonado has to have a huge game. Kalijah Cansey has to have a huge game. John Morgan has to have a huge game. Dayon Hayes has to have a big game. They've got to get after him. And then the outside linebackers have to know their jobs, and they have to know their responsibilities and their keys. Pat Narduzzi pointed out that they've got depth at linebacker now. They can go with a full 6 at linebacker. You know, starters of Shane Simon and Bengali Kamara and Servassier Dennis, and then, you know, backups of Tyler Wiltz and Solomon DeShields and Brandon George. You know, find the right combination that's going to slow down this offense. And if Kamara and Simon can't do it, go to Wiltz and DeShields. And if Wiltz can't do it, go back to Kamara. And if DeShields can't do it, go back to Simon. Mix and match until you find. And if you have to move Servassier Dennis to an outside linebacker position, do that too. You got to find the right combination that's going to hold up out there. The corners are going to do what the corners do. They're going to be pretty reliable, and they're going to give up a big play every now and then. The safeties, I think you can count on those guys to do their job, but they don't operate on an island. They need help from other players around them. And it's that really, you know, inside the tackle box type of, you know, those guys all have an impact on what it looks like and what it means for the safeties. Whereas the corners are just kind of out there doing their thing. And so the safeties, I think, can be fine, can be solid, but they need the outside linebackers to play well. And I think this defense needs, like I said, they need to have the mentality of taking over the game and making game-winning plays and game-changing plays. I think they need to look at this as a game that the defense wins. Now, all that said, I think it will be a game that the defense wins. I don't know who's going to play quarterback. Pitt's chances obviously increase with Keaton Slovis. They decrease without Keaton Slovis. I think Israel Benekanda can run well. I think he's going to have another good game. I don't know number-wise if he's going to follow up what he did against Tennessee, but I think he can have another productive game. I think some of the other backs can get in the mix as well. But I think this is going to be one that the defense wins. And that doesn't mean that they're going to play a perfect game. It doesn't mean they're not going to give up any plays. I think they'll probably give up a few because those RPOs will hit. But I think they'll also make a few plays. I think they'll make some of those splash plays, interception, sack, strip sack, fumble. I think they'll get a couple turnovers out of it, and I think they'll end up winning. And I think they'll get a field goal or two out of Ben Sauls too. I think they just kind of get back on track with the confidence level there. So that's my sort of tenuous prediction. Is Pitt going to cover 10 points? I don't know. In the kind of game I'm describing, it seems unlikely. And even, Michigan State ends up winning, 35-13, but they scored 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. So, I mean, you take that away, you're talking about an 8-point game, right? You're talking about a 21-13 game going into the fourth quarter. It's a 1-score game. And so even that game wasn't a blowout. I wouldn't be surprised if this game looks similar heading into the fourth quarter, 1-score game. 21-13 would not surprise me in the least. I don't know if Pitt's offense would come up with 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter in that scenario, but I think the defense could come up with some big plays to keep Western Michigan in bay. So that's sort of my expectation. We'll find out if I'm right or not. We'll see tomorrow night. Remember, after the game is over, I don't have an exact start time yet, but we will go live for our post-game show here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. If you want to, like I say, I'm not sure what time we're going to start. Maybe around 11:15 is probably a good idea or general time for you to keep an eye out. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit that subscribe button right there. You can see it right over there, right down there on that yellow.com. There's that blue rectangle that says subscribe. Click that and then turn on the notifications. You'll get an alert sent right to your phone whenever we go live for the post-game show on Saturday night. Of course, you also get a notification when we go live on Wednesday nights for the Panther-Lair show that we do every Wednesday at 8:30. And then you'll know when we release one of these Morning Pitt videos. We do it every Monday through Friday, every morning, and we talk about whatever's going on in the world of Pitt. Give your talking points, like this, a game preview. If Pat Narduzzi says something interesting, depth chart changes, news breaks, we'll recap it and break it down and talk about what it means. And we do it every day, Monday through Friday, right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. This is like the third week, I think, that we've been doing these videos. It's been a lot of fun, had a lot of great engagement, gotten a lot of great feedback, and we appreciate all of that. So like the video, click the like button, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Those things are huge for us. Leave a comment if you want. If you want to chat, we can go back and forth a little bit in the comments on the videos. But like I say, hit the like button and subscribe. That's what matters the most. That's what we appreciate the most. And make sure you stay tuned all day, all weekend to Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. It's the most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet. Football, basketball, recruiting, we cover it all at Panther-Lair.com, and message boards where you can talk to other Pitt fans all day, every day, Panther-Lair.com. So go to the website. Make sure you stay tuned throughout the game. We'll have a game thread going. It should be a lot of fun. It always is entertaining. And yeah, we'll have lots of coverage leading up to, coming out of the game tomorrow night at Western Michigan. All right, that is it. Thanks again for another great week of the Morning Pit. Have a great Friday. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you after the game on Saturday night, and then we'll be back on Monday morning with another Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.